"Don't get on that elevator. Go back to your car. Something's wrong up there. Wait." She said it so quietly I almost didn't hear her over the parking garage echo. An older woman, maybe 70, sitting on a concrete bench near the stairwell with a paper cup of coffee going cold in her hands. She wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was looking at the elevator doors. I almost kept walking. I'm a 31-year-old paralegal at a mid-size family law firm in Columbus, Ohio. I deal in facts, documents, depositions. I do not take life advice from strangers in parking garages. I especially do not take it seriously when I'm already 12 minutes late to pick up a certified envelope from my fiancé's office on the 14th floor because he said he needed my signature on something before 5. But I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way she said it. Not like she was crazy, not theatrical, just tired. The way someone sounds when they've already watched something bad happen and can't figure out how to explain what they know. I turned around. She was still staring at the elevator. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked at me then. Her eyes were steady. "Don't go up yet. Sit here a minute." I sat. I told myself it was because my feet hurt. I'd been in heels since 7 that morning, and it was now 4:48 in the afternoon, and my left pinky toe had been screaming at me since lunch. That's what I told myself. My name is Jory Callahan. That's what everyone's called me since I was 4 years old, short for Marjorie, which I've always hated. I grew up in Dayton, moved to Columbus for law school, dropped out after one semester when I realized I was better at organizing other people's arguments than making my own, and built a career doing exactly that. I'm the person attorneys hand a mess of papers to, and I hand back a case. My fiancé. I'll call him my fiancé because that's what he was until about 6 hours after this story starts. Had an office on the 14th floor of a building downtown, where his family's property management company had operated for 30 years. His father started it. He ran it now, or he was supposed to run it. I'd learn later he was running something else entirely. I sat next to that woman for maybe 4 minutes. She didn't say anything else. She just sat there with her coffee, and I sat there with my phone in my lap watching the elevator numbers above the doors tick up and down. At 4:52, my fiancé texted me. "You almost here? Need the signature before close of business." I typed back, "Almost. Traffic." She glanced at my phone when it buzzed. Then she said, "The woman up there with him, she's been here 3 times this week." And that was it. That was all she said. I looked at her. She looked back at me, and she didn't look crazy, and she didn't look like she was trying to cause trouble. She looked like a woman who had seen something from that bench, maybe every day, sitting there with her coffee, and had decided today she was going to say something about it. I went back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, engine off. The rational part of my brain, the part that had spent 7 years sorting through other people's lies in family court documents, started working. My fiancé's office was on the 14th floor. His assistant had her own desk in the outer office. There were 2 other people on that floor, both older men who'd worked for his father. He'd told me last week he had a late vendor meeting Tuesday and Thursday. Today was Thursday. I thought about the certified envelope, the one requiring my signature before close of business. I pulled out my phone and opened the email he'd forwarded me 2 weeks ago when I'd asked what exactly we were signing. It was a joint asset agreement, combining our savings, restructuring the deed on the condo I'd bought before we got together, and listing us as co-beneficiaries on each other's life insurance policies. He'd framed it as the responsible thing to do before marriage. "We're building a life together, Jory. This is what adults do." I'd hesitated, he'd pushed, I'd almost signed. I thought about that word, almost. I got out of my car, but I didn't take the elevator, I took the stairs. 14 flights in heels is not something I recommend. By the time I reached the door to the 14th floor, I was breathing hard, and my left pinky toe had moved from screaming to what I can only describe as a full breakdown. I cracked the stairwell door and looked out. The outer office was empty. His assistant's desk was dark, computer off, chair pushed in. The overhead lights were on their evening setting, dimmed to about 60%, the way they went automatically after 5. But the door to his private office was closed, and the light under it was on, and I could hear voices. I know that building. I've been there 100 times. I know where the floor creaks and where it doesn't. I know the supply closet next to his office has a shared wall that's never been properly insulated because the renovation in 2019 cut corners on the interior framing. His father complained about it once at dinner. "Sound travels right through it," his father said. You can hear everything. The supply closet wasn't locked. I stood in the dark between shelves of printer paper and cleaning supplies, and I listened, her voice first. She was laughing at something. Then quiet. The specific quiet of two people comfortable with each other in a space they think is private. Then his voice. Did you bring the updated version? A rustling of papers. Her. Right here. She signs the original tonight, we file Monday. The account transfer clears by Wednesday at the latest. A pause. Him. She won't look too closely. She trusts me on the financial stuff. Says it gives her a headache. She laughed again. That's almost sweet, he said. She's a paralegal, she should know better. Something about the way he said it. Not cruel, not loud. Just factual. Like I was a variable in a spreadsheet that had failed to account for its own risk. She should know better. Past tense. Like he'd already moved on from any version of me that could have stopped this. I pressed my back against the shelf and kept breathing. She and the condo? Him. Once it's in both our names, I can leverage it for the Dayton project. That's $3.2 million in financing I can't get otherwise. Her credit history is spotless. Mine's complicated right now. She how complicated, long pause. Him there's a lien. From the Henderson deal, nothing she knows about. A lien, on his assets. Which was why he needed my name on the deed. My clean credit history. My condo that I'd saved for 6 years to buy. My signature on a document that would make his financial disasters my legal problem. She said, and if she finds the lien before Monday, he said she won't. She doesn't go looking for things she doesn't expect to find. It's actually one of the things, it's just how she is. It's just how she is. I stood in that supply closet and I did not fall apart. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect a dramatic collapse. Tears, hyperventilating, some kind of visible shattering. What actually happened is that I went very, very still. The way I go still when I'm working through a complicated document. The same part of my brain came online. It started running through what I knew, what I could prove, and what I needed to do next. What I knew. He had a pre-existing lien on his assets he'd hidden from me. He was planning to use my signature on a joint deed to leverage financing for a business deal. He had been meeting with this woman, regularly, enough that a stranger noticed, in his private office. He had structured the paperwork so it moved fast, Monday to Wednesday, before I might notice anything was off. What I could prove? Nothing yet. What I needed? Evidence and time. I quietly took out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I pressed record and set it on the shelf near the wall, as close to the shared surface as I could get it, without knocking anything over. Then I listened for 20 more minutes. In those 20 minutes I learned the following. The woman's name I won't repeat because she is not the main villain of this story. She is just a person who made bad choices alongside someone who made worse ones. The Dayton project was a commercial real estate development his company had been struggling to finance for 14 months. The lien on his assets was from a failed partnership deal in 2022. A deal he had never once mentioned to me in 3 years of dating and 18 months of engagement. He had chosen me, at least in part, because I owned property free and clear, because I had no debt, because I had a credit score that financial advisors describe as pristine, and I heard him say this directly, I was not the type to go digging. He also, at one point, said, after we're married, she'll have access to my accounts too. I'll set it up so the liabilities look like shared expenses by the time she notices. I turned off the recording, I checked the file size. 22 minutes, clean audio. I sent a copy to my personal email, my Google Drive, and a cloud backup service I'd been using for 3 years that he didn't know about and had once lightly made fun of. Why do you need 3 backup systems for your files? He'd asked once. Because I work in family law, I'd told him. I've seen what happens when people only have 1 copy of something important. He'd smiled and said, that's very you. Yes, it is very me. I slipped out of the supply closet, back down the stairs, out through the lobby, and into the parking garage. The woman on the bench was gone. Her paper coffee cup was still there, sitting on the concrete next to where she'd been. I sat in my car and I thought carefully. The certified envelope was still upstairs. My signature was still unsigned, which meant the timeline he was counting on. Sign tonight, file Monday, transfer Wednesday, was still intact in his mind. He still thought everything was on track. He still thought I was 12 minutes late to traffic and would walk through that door any minute, apologetic and tired, ready to sign whatever he put in front of me. Good. I texted him at 6:14 p.m. So sorry, terrible headache, I had to go home. Can we do the signing tomorrow? 3 dots. A pause longer than usual. Then, of course, feel better. I'll bring it by in the morning. He would bring it by in the morning, to my condo. His name not yet on the deed. I spent that night at my kitchen table with my laptop and a yellow legal pad, and the 7 years of professional instinct I'd spent building in family law. First thing I did was pull every document he'd sent me over the past 4 months, the joint asset agreement, the updated insurance beneficiary forms, the deed modification paperwork, the shared investment account setup. I laid them out in chronological order and read every line the way I read other people's paperwork, looking for the thing that's designed not to be found. The lien wasn't in any of it, of course it wasn't. But now that I knew to look, I could find it. I went to the Franklin County Recorder's website at 7:30 p.m. and searched his name. Ohio property and lien records are public. I'd looked up dozens of them for attorneys over the years. It took me 11 minutes to find it. Filed in March 2023, $340,000. The Henderson Group LLC versus his company. A judgment lien, meaning a court had already ruled against him, and the debt was attached to any property in his name in the state of Ohio. If I had signed that deed modification, that lien would have attached to my condo within 30 days of filing. I photographed every screen, saved every document, added them to the backup cloud folder. Then I called the one person I trusted most in my professional life, a senior attorney at my firm named Harriet, who specialized in asset protection and had once described herself to a client as the woman you call when someone has already tried to steal from you. I'd worked with her for 4 years. She picked up on the second ring even though it was 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday, because that is the kind of attorney she is. I told her everything. The supply closet, the recording, the lien, the paperwork. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "You have the audio?" "Yes," she said. "Don't sign anything. Don't let him into the condo tomorrow, and send me that recording tonight." I sent it. By 10:30 p.m. she had forwarded it with her own attached memo to a real estate attorney she trusted and to a colleague who handled fraud cases. By morning, I would have 2 additional professionals who had reviewed the situation and could speak to what the documents showed. At 11:47 p.m., I did one more thing. I went to the online portal for the life insurance policy he'd added me to, the one where I had also added him as beneficiary, at his suggestion 6 months ago. I requested a beneficiary change form, not filed yet, just requested. In Ohio, a beneficiary change requires a notarized signature, and mine was not going to be notarized on anything until Harriet told me it was safe to put pen to paper. I slept for 4 hours, not well, but I slept. He arrived at my door at 9:20 the next morning with the envelope under his arm and a coffee carrier with 2 cups. He'd remembered my order, oat milk latte. The kind of detail that makes someone seem like a good partner for a long time before you understand it's just attentiveness deployed strategically. I opened the door. I let him in. I want to explain why, because I know how it sounds. The reason I let him in is that I was not afraid of him. I was done with him, but I was not afraid. And I needed him to believe everything was normal for about 4 more minutes. Harriet had told me, "Let him come, don't sign. Get him on record saying what the document is." He set the coffee on my kitchen counter. He put the envelope on the table. He was relaxed, comfortable. He'd had the night to settle back into his plan, and he thought it was still working, he said. "How's the headache?" "Better," I said. "What is this one again?" He explained it the same way he had before. Joint asset agreement. Standard premarital stuff. Combines our finances, puts us both on the deed, sets us up as a unit going into the marriage. I said, "And there's nothing attached to your assets I should know about, like any outstanding debts or judgments." He didn't flinch. "I'll give him that," he said. "Nothing significant." "Why?" I said. "I just want to make sure we're starting clean." He said, "We are." I nodded. I picked up the envelope. I turned it over in my hands. Then I set it back down and said, "I looked up your company last night on the county recorder site. March 2023. The Henderson lien." The coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. I said, $340,000. Judgment lien. Meaning if I sign this deed modification, that debt follows my property. He set the cup down. He looked at me and I could see him deciding which version of this to try. The explanation, the minimization, the reframe. He went with the reframe. He said, "It's being resolved. It's a technicality from a bad partnership." "I was going to tell you," I said. "When?" He said, "After the wedding. When it was already handled. I didn't want you to worry." After the wedding. When I was already legally attached to his debt. When worrying about it would no longer change anything. I said, I have a recording from your supply closet. That was when his face changed. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. Just something went out of it. Some version of him that had been performing for 3 years stepped back, and what was left was quieter and a lot less certain. He said, you were there. I said I was there. He said, Jory. I said, Harriet has a copy. So does the attorney she referred me to, and a fraud specialist. He sat down. He didn't ask me to. He just sat down in the chair at my kitchen table, like the bones went out of his legs. He tried, still. Give him credit for trying. He said it wasn't what it sounded like. He said she was a business consultant. He said the Dayton project was legitimate. He said he'd planned to disclose the lien eventually, that the timeline was just complicated. He said I'd misunderstood the context of the conversation. I said, you said she doesn't go looking for things she doesn't expect to find. He stopped. I said, you were right. I usually don't. But someone told me to pay attention. He didn't ask who. I don't think he really wanted to know. He left with the envelope still on my table unsigned. He didn't slam the door. He didn't threaten me. He just left. The way people leave when they've run out of moves and they know it. And I stood in my kitchen and listened to his footsteps go down the hall, and then the elevator, and then nothing. The weeks after that were not easy. I want to be honest about that too. Ending a 3-year engagement is paperwork, and it is also grief, and sometimes it is both at the same time in ways that are hard to separate. There were nights when I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, and nights when I was just sad about the version of him I'd thought I was marrying. Which is a strange thing to mourn. A person who never existed. But the practical pieces came together quickly because I knew how to make them come together. The deed modification was never filed. The joint asset agreement was never signed. Harriet sent a formal letter to his attorney, documenting the attempted concealment of the lien and noting that the audio recording had been preserved. No charges were filed. What he'd done was ugly, but it existed in the gray area between legal and fraudulent. But his attorney advised him that contesting anything would not go well, and he didn't contest anything. The lien on his assets became his problem again, entirely and only his problem, and the Dayton project, from what I heard later through professional channels, because Columbus is not as big as people think, collapsed without the financing he'd been trying to arrange through my credit and my property. I changed my insurance beneficiary. I changed my door code. I took back the spare key I'd given him when I thought a spare key was just what you did when you loved someone. I still think about that woman on the bench. I've gone back to that parking garage 3 times at different hours, and I've never seen her again. I don't know her name. I don't know why she said something to me when she could have just sat there and finished her coffee. I don't know how she knew what she knew, or whether she knew anything at all, and was just a woman with good instincts and a willingness to use them. What I know is that I almost didn't stop. I almost kept walking, got in that elevator, went upstairs, and signed my name to 3 years of someone else's debt and deception. She said something's wrong up there. She was right about the elevator. She was right about the floor. She was right about everything I was about to walk into. I don't know if I believe in anything more than that. But I know I listened, and I know what listening cost me, nothing, and what it saved me, everything. So if a stranger ever tells you to wait a minute, in a quiet voice, not dramatic, just tired and certain, maybe wait a minute, maybe sit down. Maybe let the elevator go without you and see what happens next.